voicing Earth's question to the inscrutable power, the queen now, she is voicing her question not to Narad, but to the inscrutable power. The queen now turned to the still immobile sphere. As I told you last time, still is an adjective, not an adverb. Narad remains always calm, still, assailed with the discontent in nature's down, partner in the agony of dumb thing, and all the misery, all the ignorant cry. Yes, we keep on shouting and all that, but it is an ignorant cry. It is an ignorant cry. We don't know. We say God, this, it is other thing, but it's an ignorant cry. Even if we ask for a boon, it is an ignorant asking of the boon. We really don't know what the true boon. What we should ask really, that also we don't know. Most of the time our boon is formed by mind or by emotions, which is not really the true prayer also. Passionate like sorrow, I told you last time. Passionate like sorrow. That is the great psychological phrase. Savitri's mother, human being, is passionate like sorrow. Sorrow has a human quality in it, and it is that full sorrow which is imbibed in human Savitri's mother now. She is passionate, like questioning heaven. She spoke. Obviously, she is going to question heaven itself. She is going to ask that foolish question. Mother will say, she. A while she lost her spirit's tranquil poise. Now that is a great attribute of Savitri's mother. Lost her spirit's tranquil poise. Savitri's mother herself, as we have seen earlier, a person of some spiritual realization, spiritual attainments. The deep questions she was asking, they had spiritual realizations in them. But here she has become too human, she has become too emotional, she has become passionate like sorrow, and she is asking some kind of human questions now. And bore the heavy hand of death and time, and felt the anguish in life stricken deep. Now that is the greatness of Savitri's mother. That is the greatness of Savitri's mother. It is not her anguish. It is not she as a human being who is revolting against that verdict. Not as a person she is revolting. She is identifying herself entirely with the life-stricken grief. The universal grief of life, it is that which she is expressing in her words. She has identified herself with life's stricken deeps. That is the real spiritual quality of that lady. Her personal grief has now become universal grief, and it is to that universal grief she is lending her voice. She is crying on the behalf of this deep grief. Lending a speech to the surface soul on earth, she uttered the suffering in the world's dumb heart. Again, it is not in her dumb heart, but in the dumb heart of the world which is there. This entire creation is crying, why? It is to that she is giving the utterance. And when she is identifying herself with the world, and when she is getting the answer as a response to that cry, it is not her personal grief which is assailed, which is reduced, which is removed. It is the world's grief which is removed. She has identified herself with the world's grief. When she receives the answer, it is not she as an individual who is receiving that answer. It is the whole world's grief which is receiving that answer. So it has at once a universal dimension. The identification of her grief with the world's grief is an occult aspect of the whole development. And it is in that occult working that the world's grief is going to receive the answer. And man's revolt against the ignorant fate. Now, of course, man's revolt against his ignorant fate. Now, he is ignorant It's not fate who is ignorant. It is a transferred epithet. It is man who is ignorant. It is man who is ignorant. It is a transferred epithet. That's the technique, poetic technique of the English language. The ignorant stands for man, and ignorant man's revolt against fate. That is what it would mean, basically. Ignorant man's revolt. But that is not poetry at all. It's not poetry at all. And then she says, "O seer in the earth's strange, by-natured life, by what pitiless adverse necessity or what cold freak of Creator's will, by what random accident or governed chance that shaped a rule out of a fortuitous steps, made destiny from an hour's emotion, came the dire mystery of grief and pain." In fact, that is her basic question. That is her basic question. How it has happened? This is what she is really asking. How this has really happened? This is the question she is asking. By what mystery has come into God's creation this grief and pain? And then it is in that context you have to see, is it thy God who has made this cruel law? See? Is it thy God who has made this cruel law? Or some disastrous power has marred his work and he stands helpless to defend or save? He is helpless now. Something has happened. Somebody has cut and knocked off the base, has cut the roots of the infinite fountain, and now he is standing helpless. Is it thy God or some disastrous power has marred this work and he stands helpless to defend or save? Now, this is a question, of course, which she'll unfold. This is what we have seen. A fatal seed was sown in life's false start. When evil twain with good on earthly soil, when evil and good separated themselves from the earthly soil, it is at that point a fatal seed was sown. A fatal seed was sown. Now, Shependu is absolutely remarkable. He says, life's false start. Life's false. Lives had jumped to the line before the gun fired. You start the race when the gun is fired, but if somebody steps ahead of the firing of the gun, then it becomes a false start. Either the person is disqualified or you shoot the gun again. So the phrase false start is this phrase for the horse race. You fire the gun and the race begins. If the horse runs ahead of that firing, then it's a false start. It's a disqualification. So this lady is very clever. She knows everything, you see. A fatal seed. So when that false start appeared, then at that point the fatal seed was sown.